Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today on why work from anywhere is not as simple as it sounds. So we've got an action-packed 30 minutes ahead, and I think we've got to give it a couple of minutes for people to join. So hope you're all excited for the presentation today. We've got a global audience. We've got people who've signed up from the Americas. So good morning to you guys who are from the US, Canada, Latin America. Good afternoon if you're from Europe, like Sam and I here. And good evening if you're calling in from or joining from Asia. So I guess whilst we wait a minute or two for people to join, maybe we'll start with some quick introductions. So Sam, I'll hand over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Zan. And yeah, good day, everyone. Welcome, obviously, from wherever you're watching along. Obviously, as Zan said, my name's Sam. I'm part of the Centuro global team here in London, and I'm sort of day-to-day actively speaking with our clients and customers on the challenges companies are typically facing, and obviously what they're hearing in this new era of remote work from both an efficiency and also compliance perspective. So really interested and keen to have a conversation today regarding that. Also, just want to start off and apologise in case anyone's a little bit confused as to the accent. I'll apologise straight away. It's a mix of a Kiwi and Australian, and hopefully I'm getting a little bit of an English or London influence in that soon too. So yeah, don't hold it against me. And additionally, obviously, we've got Zan here. I'll introduce himself a little bit as well, but he's an experienced lawyer and our fearless CEO here at Centuro Global. So let's not hold it against him for being a lawyer on this occasion.
So it's funny, you kind of displayed some typical Kiwi traits there. Apologising for your accent, I don't think that's necessary there, Sam. But at the same time, insulting me for being a lawyer, so I'm confused. No, just kidding. So yeah, thanks, Sam. I think myself at Centuro, we're kind of working in this space of legal, tax, immigration compliance, and I'm a CEO as well. So this is a very interesting topic in terms of how we manage staff and run our businesses. So definitely excited to kind of dig deep now. So I think it's been a couple of minutes. So Sam, should we get stuck in?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. So look, obviously, we just want to cover the concept of working from anywhere and why it may not be as simple as it sounds. Just to set a bit of an agenda, we're going to start off with the sort of current landscape and polarization around returning to the office versus working from home, followed by the compliance challenges of working from anywhere, and then finally, why working from anywhere policies are really becoming table stakes. So before we kick off as well, just wanted to say, look, you're all welcome to put in your questions in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye out for them and answer throughout if we can, but we'll also have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to jump in there. Great, let's get into it. So just to sort of set the scene, guys, remote work, as we know, was really fueled by COVID near enough 4 years ago to the day almost. So there's always been this continuous healthy debate here by all over a meal and a pint, but recently major CEOs, global CEOs are really pushing people back to the office. And to provide some numbers on this, recent report from KPMG actually shows that at least 64% of global CEOs anticipate a full return to office by 2025. Now, this may be a little bit aggressive, but that's what they're saying. And additionally, 87% said that they are more likely to reward employees who come into the office, like I am today, with raises or promotions. Wink, wink, Zan. So there's clearly a push from global CEOs. And look, to actually quote CEO of L'Oreal, he's saying that, permanent remote workers have absolutely no attachment, no passion, no creativity, and they think it's vital to be in the office. It's all about serendipity and about meeting people. So, it's some bold statements, but, Zan, I guess I wanted to ask you, what have you personally seen in relation to this movement?
Yeah, it's a really polarizing topic. I think you're seeing all sorts of companies, leaders, CEOs, HR leaders, all coming out with different arguments, and it is really polarizing. I mean, I was in a room around 3 months ago with several prominent CEOs. So we had Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, we had the CEO of Goldman Sachs, David Solomon, there was Stephen Schwartzman from Blackstone. There was a whole host of really big, heavy hitter CEOs of financial services, and they were all completely unanimously against remote work in any form. which was interesting. And I actually found it quite shocking. I know there's the stereotype around financial services that's been in the news, but when you're in the room with these people, when they're talking about it, it's even more striking. And we can kind of sum up their views into two statements. This is my kind of summary of what they said. So they argued that from a leadership point of view, you cannot effectively lead people who are working from home full time. So that's the first statement. And the second kind of takeaway was, this one's very controversial, so I won't say who in particular in the room said it, but one of the CEOs said, no matter how much people claim they do not work as hard when working from home full time.
Yeah, controversial. We won't comment on that. But if we break down those sort of two views and opinions, and firstly, what are your thoughts on, this point of leadership and not being able to effectively lead?
Yeah, so I think that it's a pretty strange point to make. I mean, if you think about it, let's say take JP Morgan as an example. They've got over 300,000 employees. So if you're the CEO of JP Morgan, realistically, how many of those people are you interacting with in person on a day-to-day basis? Okay, I understand it's not always the CEO, so they're probably also thinking of their own leaders, managers within the organization. But if you really think about it, we're in a world now where people have been working from offices for 300-400 years. So it's a really established way of working. Whereas remote work only came in around 4 years ago across the board globally. So we're still early in that journey, but it's been, simplified because of technology. And we're just going to have to adapt. We're going to have to learn how to make it work and how to make it better. And, it's a fine balance. Like certain roles will have to be in person, almost full time. Some can be hybrid. Some are much easier to do remotely. There's no point being in the office if you're going to be on video calls all day with no one in the office and you don't speak to anyone in the office. So there's all those kind of fine balances to think about. But from a leadership point of view, management point of view, we have to adapt and find better ways of working and leading. It's not about FaceTime.
Yeah, look, totally agree. And look, as you say, leadership and management, they're two very different things. And undoubtedly there are challenges with leading remote teams, and this is something we're just going to have to adapt to and solve over time. But that aside, the question on, the second point, question on productivity regarding working from home. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so we have got data now. It's been 4 years, and various companies have put some studies together and looked into this. So a company called Apollo Technical, they ran a report that showed that 63% of the highest revenue growth companies in the world in 2022 supported hybrid or remote models. So that's 63% of the highest revenue growth companies. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean there's causation correlation because people are working from home or hybrid, but there's something that's the vast majority of high revenue growth companies have that model. Something's going on there. And then this one's even more interesting. So of the people surveyed, it seems that people who work from home work on average 43% more hours than when they're in the office. So obviously you're eliminating commute times, you're blurring the line between home and work life, and people fall into the trap of working longer. Well, I say trap, it's not necessarily a trap. It could result in burnout. Maybe it's not a good thing. But of those people surveyed, it also showed that remote workers report 25% less stress. So in terms of productivity, they're working more hours and feeling less stress. Again, this is on average, might not apply to everybody or across the board, but these are some interesting statistics. And these surveys were predominantly focused on Europe and North America, but there have also been studies done in other regions. So the University of Chicago did some research into Brazil to get some Latin American representation, and they surveyed 1,200 people in Brazil. And this is interesting, they found that individuals value working from home as the single most valuable attribute they considered in the workplace, more than any other benefit. And they equated it to, on average, 15% more salary. So imagine a 15% salary increase.
Yeah, placing a really, really high value on obviously working from home then and that flexibility. So some really interesting stats there, Zan. And look, I guess obviously we've got to take into account that, this is 4 years worth of data, and people started working from offices back in the 17th century. So, we need to sort of extrapolate this data out, but there are some really strong stats there, and it does cover data from across the globe. So look, working from home aside, where does working from anywhere come into this?
Yeah, so work from anywhere, which is the core focus today, that's kind of a subset of work from home. So it's effectively a benefit that companies can offer to employees that allows them to work overseas rather than home for a set number of days a year. So you can kind of break this down into 2 to 3 core options. So the first one would be workations. So that's where somebody goes on holiday or a vacation for a week or two. And they may ask their employer, oh, can I actually go away for 3 weeks? I'll be on holiday for 1 week, but 2 of those weeks I'll be working. So they're effectively extending their vacation by combining it with work. So some people turn around and say, okay, that's only really attractive for young people in their 20s, and maybe they want to go traveling and they want to see places and they combine it with work. But actually, when you think about it, this could be beneficial for a whole variety of different demographics. Look at parents with kids, maybe in the school holidays. You want to be working from different locations. Maybe the grandparents live in, well, let's say you're in London, you work from London, maybe your parents are in Scotland, so you want to take the kids to see their grandparents in Scotland. Then maybe you do a week in Paris, you take them to Disneyland for a few days. Maybe your husband takes the day off and looks after the kids whilst you're working. The next day you have the day off and he's working. So there's all sorts of ways that this can encourage flexible working. And it doesn't apply just to young people, it can be for other people, it could be for expats. So Sam, you mentioned you're from New Zealand, your family currently lives in Australia. If you wanted to go back home from London, you don't want to just go for a few days or a week, it's so far to travel. So you might think, oh, I'll go for 3 weeks and, I'll have 10 days holiday. And then the other days I'm still there. I can see my family in the evenings. I can see friends on the weekend back home, and I'm working the rest of the time. So yeah, so workations are a good benefit or model of work from anywhere. Second one is probably extended remote work. So that's probably more relevant for the younger population. Say, hey, I want to go live in Bali for 3 months. Can you let me work from Bali for 3 months, or wherever it might be? So you can pick a period of time, 1, 3, 6 months. Those are kind of the main two. And then the third one's more full-term digital nomadism. So you're just constantly traveling. And that's probably the least common in terms of employees. And it's more common with, freelancers and self-employed people. But some companies are 100% fully remote and allow their employees to work literally from anywhere, anytime. So those are effectively the three work from anywhere models.
I see. And look, I can certainly see, the benefit and the appeal from both workations and extended remote work. As you used the perfect example on me, Zain, it's ultimately giving employees that extra flexibility and freedom. So really, really appealing. To complement that, we also have a really interesting stat from a survey conducted by GitLab from thousands of employees that were interviewed across Europe and the US, and 82% of respondents showed interest in being able to work from overseas in 2024. So, what's interesting here is that the data shows that employees are happier when they can work remotely, and that this is what they want. So, Zain, why are most employers still pushing for a return to work mandate?
Yeah, it's an interesting conflict. I mean, there's probably 2 main reasons. So one, which we've already touched on at the beginning of this webinar, so that's the old school thought on culture, productivity, face time. That tends to come from traditional industries such as financial services, maybe an older generation of bosses. So that's one that needs to be overcome. But the second one, which is our core focus today, is compliance. Because it's all well and good saying it's great to work from anywhere, but as the title of this webinar is, it's not quite as simple as it sounds. So if we go deep into the compliance issues, there are a whole different host of issues, but we're going to focus on 3 today. So 3 main regulatory areas to watch out for when you're implementing work from anywhere policies. Number 1 is immigration. So, what are the laws in every country? How accepting is a country to remote work? Number 2, corporate tax triggers and this kind of concept of permanent establishment, which I'm going to explain a little bit later. And thirdly, personal individual tax triggers. So those are kind of the 3 core areas we're going to talk about now. So if we start with the immigration issues, I mean, everyone's pretty aware. Most countries require individuals who aren't citizens or permanent residents to obtain a visa or work permit to legally work whilst in that country. So I'm sure most of the audience, you're aware that the type of visa that's needed can vary significantly depending on various factors. It could be the individual's nationality, how long they're staying in this place, the nature of the work that they're going to be doing. So there's a whole host of factors that need to be put into policies that you create. And there is a general rule of thumb. It's not really a rule, but a lot of companies tend to follow follow a theory that 30 days is low risk in a jurisdiction. But there are certain countries where even 30 days is too much, and they'll come down hard on you. So even a short business trip in some scenarios could be regarded as needing a work permit. So it can be easy to trip up.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess the obvious question then, Zain, is, what are the consequences of tripping up?
Yeah, I mean, there's a host of consequences. It can vary from country to country, but one of the main ones is you can face fines as a company, potentially even criminal liability. In the UK, for example, you could be fined anywhere from £45,000 to £60,000 per employee. So the cost can rack up.
Yeah, absolutely. Gee, okay. No thanks. We don't want that. So look, obviously being compliant when it comes to working from anywhere, it's serious ramifications, or if you're not compliant, and obviously carries those risks for employers. To challenge this, and I often hear from HR leaders on the ground that their employees push back and question. They're going, "Oh well, how am I being tracked? What if I for just sort of a couple of weeks? It's low risk. I don't think anyone's going to know how long I'm gone for and track me." How do you think HR leaders should actually respond to these sorts of comments?
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to get certain employees pushing back, and you can't please everyone. And I think the key here is understanding between the two parties, communication. So if we start by looking at the employer perspective, the company, what might be low risk with one employee very quickly becomes high risk if it's multiple employees. And the bigger the company, the higher the risk. So if you're a tiny company with 3 people and one person wants to do it, it's probably low risk. When you're a company with thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees, an employer can't set that sort of precedent. So I think it's just, the individual is looking at it from their lens, and you've just got to explain to them, look, there's a bigger picture here, there's a big compliance risk, and we can't do that as a company, and it's not personal. And also, there are risks for the individual too. So, we are living in a technological age, and a number of countries, including the UK. So in January, the UK Border Force announced this, and a few other countries are teasing it. They're going to start trialing facial recognition at airports instead of passports. Instead of you showing your passport when you get to border control at the airport, it's just going to be automatic. Face is scanned, all your data comes up. And, there are cameras all over cities now. So, there'll be so much data where governments, countries will know where you are, how long you've been there, and all of your data is going to be up on that screen. So if you get caught and you've been here too long, you didn't have the right visa, the right work permit, you could be detained at the borders, you could be deported, you could be banned from coming back to that country again. So there's a host of risks both for the individual and the employer.
Yeah. No, this technology is advancing now, and look, obviously, again, as you said, it's a classic case of more moving parts. Bigger business, the harder it is to manage, and things can easily slip through the net. So, very scary thought, really. If you're a bigger operation, obviously, what can HR leaders and businesses do then?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds scary, but it's only scary if you're not compliant. So, you need the right policy in place. And you can see a little sticky on the side. We're actually hosting a masterclass off the back of this next week, where we're going to help companies, HR leaders build their work from anywhere policies. But the key is really, right now we're talking about visas immigration. The key is to make sure the right visas are obtained in the first place when they're required. And it isn't necessarily as hard as it sounds. So, some countries have actually jumped on this work from anywhere trend, and they've introduced specific digital nomad visas or remote work visas. And countries are doing this because it helps them attract visitors to their country, helps boost their economies. And as of today, I think there are roughly 66 countries offering a form of digital nomad visa, which shows its popularity because it's only really happened in the last couple of years. And these visas work both for short-term travel and longer term, depending on the country. So give a few examples. Iceland allows up to 6 months of remote work via their digital nomad visa. The likes of Portugal, they have a 1-year allowance, and then you can extend that yearly for up to 5 years in total. So there's different options depending on the country.
Yeah, okay. And look, I have to say as well, a lot of our clients, we've seen that the United Arab Emirates is also a very popular destination. Dubai launched a virtual working program in 2020 designed for remote working professionals, including the digital nomads. And we here at Centuro Global have seen a massive influx in demand over the last couple of years. It does, obviously, as it does offer benefits in Dubai's tax-free environment, as well as sort of the luxury and fun associated with the UAE. So there's a lot of good visa for remote workers. The key is, I guess, just getting them in place, I suppose, rather than having this blasé, devil-may-care attitude. and having staff working whilst on tourist visas and the like. So what about the corporate tax side? You mentioned this term permanent establishment earlier. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so there's a concept called permanent establishment, and probably the easiest way to explain it is by sharing kind of an example. So, I mean, if you think about it, every location your employees choose to work from, that's going to create complexities. It's going to create implications that you didn't necessarily foresee. And the bigger the workforce, the more locations they're going to, the more complicated things get. But if we break it down, let's use an example. Let's say you've got an employee, they are working from France. The company's not based in France. They're working from a cafe. If they spend long enough there, France might decide that, you know, your company has set up shop there and owes taxes, even if you don't have a physical office in the country. So it takes the flexibility of remote work from an employee perspective, and it turns into a really complex puzzle for the employer, who needs to make sure that, you know, the company avoids unintended tax liabilities.
Yeah, okay. So let's run with this example then. You're telling me there's a risk of France, for example, thinking I've set up shop on behalf of Centuro if I'm working in a cafe there long enough for an extended period.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's break it down. So the definition of permanent establishment can be quite complicated, but let's focus on a few factors. So it typically includes, firstly, physical presence. So having a fixed place of business in the country, maybe that's an office, maybe it's a branch, maybe it's a factory, a workshop. If you've got remote workers working from a location, you've probably not got any of those things. But let's say you're a WeWork member, or you're a member of a co-working space. They happen to go to that co-working space every day, or they happen to go to the same cafe every day. There's a potential risk that that starts to get deemed a place of work. So physical presence is one. Another one, which is far more relevant, is agent PE. So that's acting through a dependent agent who has and habitually exercises the authority to conclude contracts on behalf of the company. So what that really means is you've got a key employee who makes decisions on behalf of the company, and based on their role and how important they are to the business, that can trigger PE. So if we look at how that works in practice, what's really going on is countries, governments, what they're looking for, the tax authorities, they're looking for three main things, really. So they're looking for, do you have a sustained and systematic presence in the country? So that goes back to somebody working from the same place regularly for a certain period of time. Number two, meeting specific revenue thresholds from within that country. So depends how much, if you've got customers there, if that employee you've got who's working from there, if they're generating revenue. And then if that employee's activities are considered integral and essential to the company's business. So there's a few different considerations there that can trigger PE. So I mean, let's give another example. Let's take an anecdotal one. Imagine there's a company called Tech Global, just made them up. They're based in the US, and they have an employee, let's call her Emma. So they've allowed Emma to work remotely from France for an extended period. They don't have a work from anywhere policy. They're not tracking things properly. So Emma, she's a key account manager. She's working from Paris. She's conducting significant client meetings. This could be online. They don't have to be in France, the clients. She's negotiating contracts. She's closing deals. She's doing all of this from her cozy Parisian apartment, or maybe even this cafe we mentioned earlier. So unbeknownst to Tech Global, Emma's activities in France are creating a substantial business presence, and that will lead French tax authorities to consider Tech Global as having a permanent establishment in France. So this will mean Tech Global will have to comply with French corporate tax laws, despite having no formal office in France and just having an employee who said, oh, I want to work in Paris for 3 months, for example. And often they might not even know that this has been triggered, and then they get a letter from the tax authorities. And depending on when the tax authorities kind of discover this, it might even be backdated. It might be, oh, you know, you've now got to pay these fines, you've got to pay these penalties, and you owe us taxes. And suddenly you've got this massive financial obligation on the business. So, you know, HR departments really need to consider who they're going to allow to work overseas in terms of job role. You know, how much salary does this person have? How much influence do they have in the business? Also, what's their nationality? You know, how is that going to impact the type of visa or work permit they need? So there's a lot of different things that need to be considered when you're building out a work from anywhere policy to avoid this PE risk. And again, we'll go into some of those details more next week when we run our masterclass.
Awesome. And I mean, I suppose it sounds like there's obviously a big web of compliance, and obviously I'll touch on that next week as well. But from the, that's looking at the company side of things, with your PE there. But from a personal tax issue perspective on the employees, are there risks and things that they need to be aware of as well?
Yeah, so based on you as an individual, you could, tax residency rules vary from each country to country, and it can impact where you are required to pay your income taxes. So if you're spending too much time in France, you might end up with a personal income tax obligation in France. So even as an employer, they need to be wary of the salary they're paying you, who they're paying tax to. You end up paying double tax again, US and France, for example, and it just causes an administrative mess. It can result in fines, confusion, all sorts of headaches.
Yeah, I think no one really wants to be paying double tax, do they? So, yeah, worth being wary of that for sure. So I guess, look, to summarize on that, obviously, there's risks from working from anywhere include, visas and immigration, and then employees could risk being deported or detained, and employers may also be liable for breaking the law. The fact that there's a permanent establishment risk, the companies unknowingly end up being regarded as having a physical presence in a jurisdiction where they have a remote worker for too long and therefore have to pay taxes. And then obviously the individual personal tax triggers there where they end up paying double tax or messing up their tax residency, which could also impact payroll from the employer perspective. So there's a real mix of risks for both employer and perspective and an employee, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, this compliance responsibility, it's shared between the company and the employee. So both parties have an important role to play in ensuring that both local and international laws and regulations are followed. I mean, the company can suffer great reputational issues, financial risks if local authorities identify PE, permanent establishment, and tax evasion. So the safest bet is for a company to be as proactive as possible, ensure you've got the right policies, the procedures in place, ensure that all of your employees understand them and actually follow these policies and aren't running off secretly working from locations because they are allowed to work from home. No one knows where they are.
Yeah, okay. I mean, is working from anywhere even worth offering as an benefit for employers?
Yeah, I mean, it is complicated and it is hard to do, but I think there are a number of companies who are very successfully implementing work from anywhere policies. And what we've seen is that employees today, they're craving all sorts of benefits. And, working from anywhere is a great tool to attract and retain talent. So, I mean, let's look at Airbnb as an example. They were one of the kind of first movers in this space. And, when they first announced their flexible working policy, within a week of that announcement, their career page had over 1 million visitors. So, I mean, that in itself is like a massive talent attraction tool, right? That's a perfect example. And then similarly, TUI, the travel firm, they introduced last year a 30-day work from anywhere program. So before it was quite loose, people were kind of asking to work from anywhere. But I think in 2023, it was when they introduced a 30-day work from anywhere program. And they saw in 2023 a 173% increase in colleagues requesting to go on one of these work from anywhere programs. So they reported it boosted employee satisfaction and it boosted retention. And there are a whole bunch of studies that have been done on this. So, some reports have shown that companies who are recruiting, if they don't have flexible work policies, they're missing out on 50 to 70% of candidates. And then of the companies that do already have a successful work from anywhere program, 74% of HR departments stated that this policy has really helped with retention. So in this age right now where, people are trying to attract talent, retain talent, there's clearly a massive benefit to implementing work from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's so important, HR and thought leaders in a business are going to care so much about that retention, obviously being able to acquire talent from a larger pool. So super important. You mentioned TUI, did 30 days as an example. What are some other things that companies and particularly HR leaders should consider? And is 30 days a safe bet?
Yeah, so the number of days is one of the key factors. So as we touched on earlier, 30 days is kind of a general rule of thumb. A lot of companies adopt to be low risk. It doesn't always work, depending on the country, which is why you also need to map out which countries you're going to permit people to work from. So you could limit it to 5 countries, 10 countries, 50 countries. You could pick, there could be political reasons. You don't want anyone to go to North Korea. You want to go to Syria from a health and safety perspective. It could be due to the tax rules. So you need to map out which countries you want people to go to. Generally speaking, 30 days is low risk. And when you really look at these work from anywhere policies, as much as it sounds great, hey, Airbnb has a work from anywhere policy for all staff. People still have to follow a detailed policy. They still have to put in a request. That request still has to be approved. And when you look at these policies, they often tend to have a lot of strings attached, a lot of fine print. So, I mean, this example we've got here, GitLab, their kind of remote work from anywhere policy is 22 pages long. They've even got a head of remote. Airbnb itself has a 30-person team dedicated to approving or denying work from anywhere requests. Now that's a lot of burden on the employer, a lot of burden on HR departments to approve these requests. So I mean, the key is really being transparent, explaining to employees why they can go somewhere, why they can't. And if you've put the effort in to try and accommodate that request, I think that goes a long way, rather versus, sorry, no, you can't go anywhere. We've just flat out said no. And whilst it is quite burdensome, at Centuro, we're to help companies simplify that risk. We can help you build out your policies. We can support with risk assessments. We can even help you get the visas for your employees. And going a bit beyond work from anywhere, we can even help you set up your entities if that comes up. So, working with the right partner, having someone who can support and help you make sure you're compliant, I think that's key. And we're here to make everything more manageable for HR leaders. And also join our masterclass next week to actually look at how you build a policy.
Awesome, yeah. Hey, and look, Zain, I can also see Lily's just jumped on and said, hey, do you have a policy for working from anywhere that we can adopt?
Yeah, we have got some policies. We've got templates, and we can definitely share that. So we've got the masterclass next week to actually show you how to bespoke it so it's relevant to your organization, because one company's policy isn't always going to align exactly. We're going to even be benchmarking other companies so we can help you create the perfect policy for you.
Great. Well, hopefully we'll see a few people on that one next week as well. Look, is there any sort of final words that you want to add as well, Zain? We can also go to a bit of a Q&A if there are any other questions that are coming through.
Yeah, we are 1 minute over, so if we just quickly go to any other questions.
Yeah. Just if anyone has any. We've got one here from Ben. Where can we sign up to the masterclass or masterplace?
So there's a link above the chat. It's a little orange sticky. It says join our masterclass next week. If you click on that link, then you should be able to sign up. Otherwise, we'll also send an email to everyone just to let you know how you can sign up.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Well, that was a quick 30 minutes. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully people learn something new. And thank you all very much for joining. Hopefully speak to you soon.